The house was alive with the sound of laughter and the clinking of glasses, the air thick with the smell of roasted meats and sweet pastries. It was a night designed to be magical, the kind of birthday celebration my father deserved. But I stood apart from it all, feeling like a ghost among the vibrant colors of the decorations and the shimmering lights strung from the ceiling. I watched as family and friends gathered around my father, his face alight with joy, but inside, the contrast of my isolation made my heart feel heavy. Everyone was engaged in little cliques of conversation, laughter spilling out like wine from overfilled glasses. I could hear my father's cousin, the golden child, regaling a group of relatives about his latest business venture. The way they applauded him, the glances of envy and admiration in their eyes, made bile rise in my throat. His new car, his plush house, everything seemed to be a trophy of his success. Meanwhile, there I stood like a distant star flickering in the vast universe of celebration, only visible to me and fading from everyone else's view. It made sense, I suppose. I was just the daughter, the one who would inherit a measly $5,000 due to financial constraints. That trust fund felt like a sick joke played at my expense, especially when I saw the piles of extravagant wrapping paper forming mountains around my cousin. Each gift he opened seemed to add insult to injury as he beamed, giving off that air of untouched confidence, the kind of confidence I had long lost. "Can you believe it?" my cousin shouted, lifting a lavish watch from its box as if the world needed to see the gleam of his latest acquisition. "This one is from Uncle Joe, can you top that?" Everyone erupted in cheers, including my father, who clapped his hands together, eyes sparkling with pride for his talented cousin. I could not recall receiving even half as much applause in my own life. Turning away from the spectacle, I began to wander through the crowded living room, its warmth a stark contrast to the chilling realization settling in my gut. Each laugh I heard broke against my heart like the waves of a stormy sea. Each uproarious declaration felt like another cut to my already frayed identity. Was I less worthy? Was I nothing more than a shadow behind the brilliance? I slipped away toward the kitchen, seeking a moment of solitude where I could gather my scattered thoughts. The gentle hum of the refrigerator was a welcome sound. I opened the door and stared blankly at the carefully arranged platters of food. My stomach twisted, not from hunger but from the gnawing awareness of betrayal that began to seep into my bones. "Can you pass me those wine glasses?" came a voice startling me from my reverie. One of the relatives was reaching past me for a stack of glasses resting on the edge of the counter. I moved aside and they barely acknowledged me as they dunked their hands into the ice-cold Chardonnay. I felt like I had disappeared, like the world's attention had shifted, leaving me in the shadow of my own despair. As they laughed and joked amongst themselves, I tuned out their chatter, focusing instead on the stillness of the kitchen, but my thoughts were anything but quiet. Why did no one care about me? The thought echoed over and over. Was I just a side character in their play? Maybe they didn't want me in their story at all. That's when I heard it, a hushed tone beneath the laughter. I moved closer to the doorway, drawn in by the mix of curiosity and dread. There in the shadowed light, I saw my father's cousin and another relative engaged in a serious conversation, their voices low, their bodies angled close as if sharing a secret meant only for them. "It's all about the investments," my cousin said, his tone dripping with confidence. "If you really want to make a mark, you need to bury it in the right places. Trust me, I have connections." I felt like I had been stabbed in the gut. Casual mention of investments hung in the air like a dense fog swallowing the world around me. My heart raced, I felt the heat of betrayal crawl up my spine. "Hide it then?" the relative asked, their voice barely above a whisper, as if the very act of speaking this truth could get them in trouble. "Isn't that risky?" "Not at all," my cousin replied, a smirk curling his lips. "If you play your cards right, there is plenty of money to be made. And besides, the more we keep under wraps, the less they know. It's not like anyone is paying attention, especially not her," he added with a dismissive wave toward the lively gathering outside the kitchen. Her, the single word hit me like a punch to the chest. I was her. I was once the daughter of this household, cherished and adored, but now I was the they in their game. My world began to crumble as the heavy realization settled in. They were hiding money, plotting schemes, while I was left on the sidelines, feasting on the scraps of $5,000. Did you see the way she was lurking around, just waiting for a moment to catch some light, thinking she could shine like the rest of us? My cousin continued with a laugh that cut deeper than any knife. That laughter echoed through me, a cruel reminder of my pariah status. Did they truly believe I was so beneath them? Forgotten and ongoing, my life, my journey, just nothing? I felt a rush of heat rising inside me, pure indignation consuming the last shreds of my patience. My mind raced with thoughts of what this all meant. I had spent years trying to blend into the background, hoping for scraps of affection that never came. Yet here was my cousin, a thief in plain sight, masquerading as a family man, robbing not just my future but the very legacy of my father's love. "What a bunch of vultures," I whispered to myself, anger coursing through my veins as I stepped back, still hidden from view. The more I listened, the more snapshots of betrayal painted a vivid picture in my mind. I felt like a silent spectator, unseen in a theater of deceit, watching as they traded in trust for riches. Then, almost instinctively, a plan began to unfurl in my mind. I could not let this continue. I would no longer be the overlooked daughter tethered by stolen dignity. I would confront this twisted charade, expose the rot beneath their family facade. I took a deep breath, steadying myself as I listened one last time. "I'll find an opportunity," my cousin said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "She won't even see it coming." The words hit me hard, igniting a fire in my chest. I may have been living among shadows tonight, forever cast aside by family, but I would not remain there, the fool in this cruel game. I was going to enter that light, and I would reclaim what was rightfully mine, not just the money, but my place within this twisted family narrative. As I leaned back against the cool kitchen wall, I could feel determination solidify within me. This night, this birthday party, had been a turning point. Betrayal was a hard pill to swallow, but from that bitterness I would craft my revenge. The tightening grip of resentment became a bond. I would reclaim my dignity and ensure justice would have a seat at this table. I turned and stepped out from the shadows, my heart racing as the noise of the party washed over me once again, and with each step nearer to the throng of laughter and the chaos of celebration, I felt empowerment surge through me. Tonight was the beginning of my own story, and I was ready to take my place at the center stage. Everything was about to change as weeks passed. The realization of deceit draped itself like a heavy shroud around my heart. I observed my family from the periphery, watching them savor moments that should have been mine. The laughter, the embraces, the shared stories, but felt more like an outsider than ever. Each smile directed my way felt laced with thinly veiled pity, as if they all knew I was struggling, while they raised a toast to my father's cousin, celebrating his so-called wise investments. The way they applauded his financial acumen felt like salt rubbed into the wounds of my existence. They stood around him, their dense fabric of camaraderie wrapping tightly around a figure I could hardly recognize as family, and I felt my own isolation deepen. Through my small, cramped apartment, my mind spiraled back to the life I imagined. I had always thought I would be their equal, that my trust fund would soar me above the burdens of a mundane existence. Yet each time I glanced at the meager sum in my bank account, it felt like a cruel joke. Moments of my relatives posting sun-drenched pictures from exotic vacations washed over me like waves against jagged rocks. I could see them smiling in front of incredible sunsets and hopping onto sleek yachts, while my world was cluttered with overdue bills and a relentless grind to make ends meet. The embarrassment grew unbearable. One fateful evening, as I was taking out the trash, I heard the unmistakable roar of an engine. Turning my gaze, I saw my father's cousin pull up in a shiny new sports car. The kind of car that made heads turn not just because of its pristine body and gleaming chrome, but the way he stepped out with that smug confidence, a Cheshire cat grin spread across his face. The engine revved, a sound that echoed through my chest, not as a thrill or a rush, but as a challenge. I could practically hear him sneering, as if he were daring me to react. "Mia, check this out," he shouted, a taunting glint in his eye. I stood frozen for a moment, debating whether to just walk back inside to pretend I hadn't heard him. But that was impossible. He had made it clear that I was his personal punchline. "What do you think? Not bad for a little investment, huh?" His tone was dripping with arrogance, and the way laughter bubbled up from the gathering family made me feel like I had stepped into a nightmare. There was Uncle Joe, his eyes sparkling with amusement, and Aunt Lisa's unmistakable cackle cutting through the sharp evening air. "Yeah, I suppose it's great for someone who's not scraping by." I tried to keep my voice steady, but my heart thudded loudly in my chest. "Must feel nice to flaunt your wealth. Just a little humor, Mia. Lighten up." "We were all young once, right?" he quipped, leaning back against the car as if it were his throne. Their laughter rose again, sharper this time, and I felt my cheeks burn. The warmth of embarrassment spread all over my body like flames licking at my skin, each chuckle another jab in my gut. I was the punchline to a joke to which everyone else laughed except me. Right, because financial sabotage is such a laugh, isn't it? Come on, it's just friendly banter. He half shrugged, his tone all smirks. "I guess you don't get it, Mia. Maybe you should try investing like I do." His words were like knives, twisting, tearing, revealing the raw wound left by his deceit. Every shred of respect I might have held for him crumbled into dust. This was the man who had taken what belonged to my family and used it to crown himself. A thief masquerading as a philanthropist, cloaked in designer suits and dollar signs. "Yeah, because that's clearly worked out for me," I shot back, bitterness coating each word. "Maybe if I had your silver spoon, I could afford better choices." The words fell from my lips before I could stop them, erupting from a place deep inside me where shame and anger brewed. "Hey, let's not get personal, just trying to lighten the mood." He threw his hands up, and I could see cracks in his bravado. It was barely there, like a glass facade at the edge of a cliff. "Besides, we all want the best for you. Right, like throwing my needs aside for your gain, huh? Best for me? Try mocking my financial situation instead. That's so generous of you." Vicissitudes of rage surged through my veins. I wanted to scream, to hurl everything I felt back at him, but I held it back, clawing at the tears that threatened to spill. "Oh, come on, a little banter never hurt anyone," he said dismissively, as if my pain was just another punchline. "You should just lean into it, have some fun. Or are you afraid you might break a nail or something?" The laughter continued, rising around us like smoke, suffocating me, wrapping around my throat like a noose. I felt smaller than I had ever felt, the weight of their collective joy repositioning my entire world. I was drowning in their mirth, the walls of the yard closing in as the vibrant colors of the sunset faded into hues of defiance and despair. I turned on my heel, retreating into the darkness of my own existence while their laughter echoed in my ears. Inside, I could barely breathe. Each breath drew in the scent of stale coffee and lingering regret. The walls of my apartment felt like a cage, and I paced back and forth, the flickering lights casting eerie shadows as if betraying me the same way my cousin had. Why had I been so naive? Why had I ever trusted him or thought of him as family? Why? I whispered to the empty room, staring at my reflection in the darkened window. My own eyes met mine, brimming with pain, bitterness, and a hunger for justice that felt insatiable. I was done hiding. Done being the outcast, the family member overlooked, trifled with. They may think he's the golden boy, but I was ready to flip the script. It struck me like a lightning bolt, illuminating a path previously shrouded in shadows. I plotted carefully, my mind racing with ideas. This was not just about joyride pranks or petty revenge. I wanted to take a sledgehammer to the crown that he had crafted, to show everyone not just who he really was, but who I could become. Ever since that fateful moment, desperation settled over me like a storm cloud, yet alongside it came a powerful resolve. I would not remain a fragile figure in other people's grand stories. I had the means and the reasons to counter his charade. What kind of life awaited me if I risked speaking my truth, shouting it from the rooftops? "Time to play," I whispered into the night, staring into the reflection in the window. My heart raced as I considered the art of cunning, the taste of calculated moves that would shake the illusion he had surrounded himself with. I felt like a phoenix stirring from its soot, ready to rise. I would unveil him as the fraud he pretended not to be. Whole-legged and ironclad, I was a force waiting to erupt, and I would turn the tides of our twisted family saga. One decisive strike at a time. I reached my breaking point that night when everyone laughed, dismissing my hurt feelings as mere jealousy. As I sat around the long wooden table in the cozy dining room, dimly lit by the flickering glow of candlelight, I could hardly recognize the faces of the people I had spent my entire life with. To my left, Uncle Dave was pulling at his apron, filled with pride over his latest barbecue masterpiece, while Aunt Linda spilled wine all over her blouse, her laughter echoing against the walls like a discordant melody. My father's cousin sat at the head of the table, a smug grin plastered on his face as everyone raised their glasses to toast to his recent success. Another promotion, another feather in his already overstuffed cap. The clinking of glass reverberated in the silence that followed, but I felt like I was encased in a bubble, separated from this world of joviality. "Cheers to making it big," he declared, his voice booming with a confidence that grated against my skin. I forced a smile, my heart racing with a mix of anger and despair. Did they not see how fake he was, how easily he pushed others down to lift himself higher? The laughter rang through the air, thick as the aroma of burnt steak, and I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from crying. Jealousy, it stung to hear that word flung around like a careless afterthought, one that I would never own. How could they not know? How could they not care? As they clinked their glasses, I felt a deep chasm open up inside me, widening with each cheer. Then amidst their clamor, I glanced at my father and saw the spark of pride in his eyes, perhaps because of his cousin's triumph. My heart sank further. "You should learn from him, Mia. Look how far he's come," my father had said earlier in the night, the sting of his words still fresh in my mind. "Do not be envious. This is what happens when you work hard." Work hard? I felt like I was competing in a race where the finish line kept moving away from me, taunting me with dreams I couldn't touch. I swallowed hard, tears threatening to spill, but I channeled it into a fire that ignited deep within my core. No longer would I sit back and let their laughter drown my voice. That night, the laughing faces of family morphed into sinister masks of greed. I felt as though I was surrounded by wolves circling their prey, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. With clenched fists beneath the table, I focused on one particular figure among them, Cousin Success, the source of my pain. A surge of determination washed over me. This wasn't just about petty jealousy. This was about exposing a web of lies, deceit stitched together with greed, flimsy threads that I had now just begun to unravel. When they finally settled into comfortable chatter, I excused myself, feigning a need for fresh air. "Just need a moment," I said, my voice steady even as my heart raced. The night air hit my face, sharp and invigorating, grounding me as I walked toward my car parked on the curb. My trusted companion, it was time to put it to use. In the dim glow of the streetlight, I opened the app that connected us all, those shiny transactions still so displayed, like secrets begging to be discovered. With my heart pounding, I began to scroll through the family app, carefully timing my movements like a clandestine spy. My fingers danced over the screen, tapping through a series of transactions that blurred together in a haze of disbelief. He must think we're all blind. The thoughts poured through my mind as I focused intently, searching for anything that wouldn't add up, any discrepancy that could reveal his dishonesty. Hours slipped away as I leaned closer to the screen, determined not to miss a detail. I barely noticed the cold air seeping into my bones as I scrolled through their financial dealings. Suddenly, a transfer caught my attention, 2 payments made to a local contractor for renovations, but the amounts were far above the average cost. Why would he need such exorbitant expenses? My breath caught in my throat, a rush of adrenaline flooding me at the realization that this could be the beginning of something monumental. I needed proof. I felt like a detective on the cusp of a groundbreaking discovery, and I couldn't turn back now. I recorded conversations on my phone, settings fixed among family celebrations where the cousin spoke nonchalantly about his ventures, rattling off numbers while side-eye glances fell my way, hoping to belittle my struggle. I smiled in silence, plotting, knowing I was in a position of advantage. I observed strange transfers. He was slipping money into accounts labeled as investments, but were likely nothing more than mirages. Every detail I uncovered felt like a small victory, each one lifting the weight on my shoulders just a little more. I became entranced in this world of numbers and deceit. The midnight hours blurred together. My heart raced as I pieced together his lies, confirming everything I had long suspected. The barriers that had long held me back were beginning to crack open under the sheer weight of truth. As the sun began to rise on the new day, I couldn't help but think about the power I now wielded. No longer would I be the silent victim in this family narrative. I would step into the light, armed with my revelations, no longer bound by their ignorance. The thought sent shivers down my spine, sweet, intoxicating shivers. The next family gathering loomed ahead, an event ripe with opportunity. The last holiday gathering had been riddled with laughter at my expense, but this time I would ignite a different kind of fire. I would confront him, expose him, and regain my worth in ways they would never expect. I could envision the faces of my family as I revealed the evidence, shock and disbelief painted across their features. Would they finally see him for what he was? Would they finally understand what he had taken from all of us, from me? With each step I took toward my goal, the cold air felt invigorating, an electric charge that coursed through my veins. Gone were the days of uncertainty. I had a solid plan and the courage to see it through. Now my heart beat with a sense of purpose, a new sense of self-worth blooming. Gone was the victim, and in her place stood a warrior ready to reclaim her narrative. I returned to the warmth of the house, its safe haven welcoming me back, unaware of the storm brewing in my heart. The laughter had grown louder, but the words now fell on deaf ears. I was already deeper in my thoughts, imagining the confrontation and the moment of revelation that drew closer with every passing second. In the kitchen, voices collided in sweet chaos, a whirlpool of love, but with every joke and snicker I could only think about how much I craved the moment when I could turn the tides. I slipped back into the room like a ghost, unseen in my quiet determination. Every fiber of my being buzzed with the need to expose the deceit lurking so close to home. I was ready, prepared to redefine the narrative. And nothing would stop me. The day of reckoning arrived like a thief in the night. Shadows danced in the corners of my room as I sat cross-legged on my bed, surrounded by chaotic stacks of papers that whispered stories of deceit. The scent of stale coffee lingered in the air, merging with the crispness of the printer ink that stained my fingers as I sorted through the evidence. My heart raced with a rush of adrenaline, thundering loudly in my ears, nearly drowning the muffled sounds of the world outside. I could feel the weight of each fraudulent transaction, a staggering $50,000 siphoned and hidden away from the family. Day after day I had pieced together this puzzle, the betrayal clear now, and I was on the verge of taking action. Just a little bit more and then it will all be over, I breathed to myself, eyeing the assortment of documents I had meticulously arranged. Every time I glanced at the papers, I envisioned my father's cousin, his feigned charm, that perfect smile masking a heart so dark it nearly choked me with anger. Can you believe that man, all those years pretending to be one of us, and for what? Just to stab us in the back, I said aloud, addressing the silent room. It felt ridiculous, but it was cathartic, the words rolling off my tongue like fire. Each syllable scorched the truth deeper into the fabric of my reality. I leaned back against the wall, letting the cool surface steady my racing heart. My eyes fluttered to the clock, and a pang of anxiety shot through me. I had to move quickly. The longer I waited, the longer he got to bask in a facade that was beginning to crumble. I had to file the anonymous tip to the authorities, the final step in this meticulous plan. My fingers danced nervously over my laptop as I began to draft the message. The soft clicking of the keys served as a rhythm to my racing thoughts. What if this goes wrong? A voice in my head whispered, a voice that resembled doubt and despair. What if they find out it was you? Pushing the thoughts aside, I reminded myself of everything he had done. He stole from our family, from me, I said resolutely. This is justice. I stared down at the list of transactions, each one a reminder of his betrayal. I could almost hear his laughter echoing in my ears, full of sarcasm and arrogance. How many times had he flaunted his wealth at family gatherings? How many more vacations had he taken while feigning generosity to our parents? It was time he faced the music. Here goes nothing, I murmured, steeling my nerves. As I clicked the send button, a wave of liberation washed over me, so strong that it felt as if I had shed a heavy, suffocating coat. For the first time in years, I took a deep breath and smiled. The corners of my mouth turned up, almost instinctively, as a sense of lightness enveloped me. As weeks dripped by, the anticipation transformed into something more palpable at the family gatherings. The first time I caught wind of the investigation, it was during a Saturday afternoon barbecue at my aunt's house. The smell of grilled burgers filled the backyard, mingling with laughter and the chatter of family, but my mind was elsewhere. Mia, did you hear? My cousin approached me, his voice tinged with curiosity. They are really looking into Uncle Simon's financial stuff. It's crazy. Isn't it just a misunderstanding? I questioned, trying to maintain a neutral face while a swirl of triumph ripped through my heart. They wouldn't just accuse him without proof, right? Oh please, you know how he is, my cousin scoffed with a knowing glance. Always flaunting money like it grows on trees, everyone thought he was shady for a while, but now, it seems they have actual evidence. I couldn't help but feel a high tide of exhilaration within me. Each frank conversation I had with family revealed the cracks beginning to form in his carefully constructed world. They never suspected that I was the one behind it all, pulling the strings from the shadows. I reveled in the thought. It's shocking, I played my part expertly, feigning disbelief. He always seemed so put together. Little did they know how fragile that facade really was. I watched as the laughter at the barbecue continued, the careless chatter contrasting sharply with the commotion in my heart. For every secret glance exchanged among the adults, I held tightly to my truth. I was one step closer to his downfall, and despite my unwavering facade, every moment filled me with energy. Weeks passed into nights lit only by the glow of my laptop. News trickled in, the whispers grew louder, and I consumed it all, the glimmers of truth blasting through the stagnant air heavy with lies. One night I lay in bed, unable to sleep, the anticipation like caffeine surging through my veins. I could see the news reports in my mind, their headlines flashing like visions. Local businessman under investigation for financial misconduct. The taste of justice was tantalizingly close. One fateful afternoon, I overheard my aunt on the phone. I had sneaked into the kitchen to grab a glass of water, and I happened to catch a snippet of her conversation. They have been questioning him for weeks now. I can't believe it, he always seemed trustworthy. It's heartbreaking. Heartbreaking. My heart thudded with glee. Those were precisely the words I wanted to hear, a true reflection of the betrayal he had inflicted upon our family. As she continued her conversation, the reality of the investigation crept closer to my thoughts. I flitted through old memories, tossing them aside like the garbage I had finally discarded. Images of celebrations where he stood tall and cheerful, while in reality he was robbing the very people he smiled at. His downfall was imminent, but I had to keep my cool. The more disheartened they became, the closer they would move to the truth. I had toyed with the idea of confronting him, but that had passed. Why would I ruin my perfect plan? The fateful day he was first questioned arrived like a spectral visitor, hovering over the family's collective dinner table as the electricity sparked in the air. "How was your day?" my mom asked me without a hint of realization, her gaze drifting around the room. "Oh, just the usual," I replied, masking my anticipation behind a cheerful grin that I hoped appeared natural. She continued chatting as we moved to the dining area, flicking through the news on her phone. "Mia, do you think Uncle Simon will be all right?" she asked, the kindness in her eyes a stark contrast to the tempest brewing in my heart. "I hope he is," I said softly, fighting the urge to laugh. Everyone deserves a second chance, right? I felt the weight of my words roll off my tongue. I couldn't let them inside my mind. During the dinner, one of my cousins, a typically lively 15-year-old, shared her fears. "I heard on the news that they are looking into everything, even into our family's finances," she said with a quiver of apprehension. "Really? What could they possibly want? We have done nothing wrong," I replied, opting for naivete. "Yes," she exclaimed, slamming her hand on the table, which made all heads turn. "We are good people. Uncle Simon can't do this." I felt something shift within the room. They were leaning in, drifting closer to the edge of realization, which made my heart thrum like a drum. I sent a silent thank you to my coup de grace. They were leaving him behind like a ship lost at sea. The evening passed in feverish excitement. The conversations washed over me like waves, rising and falling. With every mention of the investigation, I felt alive, the truth unspooled in silent rejoicing. It was thrilling to witness my father's cousin, once untouchable, squirming in the light of the scrutiny. If only they knew. As the night drew to a close and we began to disperse, the light dimmed to a soft glow. I decided to walk home under the stars, relishing every step. Each footfall thudded against the ground like the drum roll of a concert, propelling me forward into the unknown. I thrust my hands deep into my pockets as a smile spread across my lips. The air was crisp, lingering with the smell of fresh grass and distant barbecue smoke. In that moment, I felt infinitely more powerful than before, and a wild thought raced through my mind. Perhaps this wasn't just about revenge, perhaps it was about empowerment. "I will not be silenced," I whispered into the breeze, buoyed by the anticipation of what was to come. If they only knew the truth behind the glossy facade he had built all those years. The day I received the call felt like a scene straight out of a movie, one where the underdog triumphs against overwhelming odds. The news hit me like a lightning bolt, slicing through the cloud of despair that had hovered over me for so long. My father's cousin, the man who had twisted family bonds into a web of deceit, was facing serious consequences for his actions. As the voice on the other end of the line outlined how his assets had been frozen, I could scarcely believe it. The treachery lay bare now. He had spun a tale that had granted him power, wealth, and my family's respect, all while I, the neglected outsider, had stood on the sidelines unnoticed. The prospect of potential jail time was like music to my ears, a sweet melody composed from the notes of vengeance that had long been muffled by frustration and defeat. When the day of our family gathering arrived, I spent extra time getting ready, wanting to look every bit the strong woman I had become. I slid into a fitted navy dress that hugged my figure just right and passed a hand through my hair, ensuring each strand fell perfectly. This would not just be another family reunion, it was a reckoning. As I stepped into the living room filled with my relatives, the air thick with tension, my heart raced. I felt a mixture of exhilaration and a calm determination wash over me. As I entered the room, I noticed the familiar faces, uncle, aunts, cousins, all gossipy with their words swirling like gossip-laden waves. I could already feel the shift in the room's atmosphere as eyes darted toward my father's cousin who was in the corner surrounded by a cluster of relatives. He wore a strained smile and I could see beads of sweat glistening on his forehead. A sense of satisfaction coursed through me. This was the man who had once been the golden child of our family, whose charm had blinded everyone to his greed and deceit. A chuckle almost escaped my lips at the thought of him scrambling to maintain his facade. "Mia, there you are," a voice called, pulling me from my thoughts. It was my aunt, her arms wide open, ready for a hug. I embraced her but felt the unease underneath her warm demeanor. "Have you heard about, well, you know?" She leaned in, her whisper barely audible over the clamor. I nodded, a smirk creeping onto my face. "How could I miss it? It's the hot topic of the day, isn't it?" Her eyes darted around before locking onto mine, her voice dropping lower. "Nobody knows what to make of it. Your father's cousin, I can't believe he's facing such serious consequences." She shook her head, disbelief etched into her features. "Believe it," I replied, my voice holding an edge of relief. "The truth always finds a way to surface." As we chatted, I kept glancing over to see the cousin fidgeting, trying to play off the anxiety that tinged his forced laughter. I noticed how he struggled to mask his discomfort, shifting from foot to foot as family members posed questions that seemed innocent. Questions about his well-being, or just a disguise for their real concern. Who would inherit his wealth now that the walls were closing in on him? Do you think he's really going to jail? A voice piped up from across the room, a younger cousin I had once played with during family get-togethers. "Who knows?" Another chimed in, casting a sideways glance at our cousin's direction. "But it sure would be something. He deserves a taste of his own medicine." Their voices buzzed around me like a drone, a soothing background score to the real show unfolding before us. I took a deep breath and decided to make my move, each step toward him feeling more empowered than the last. "Got a moment?" I asked, leaning against the wall beside him. The look on his face was priceless, surprise mixed with apprehension. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice coming out sharper than I expected. "Oh, just wanted to see how you're holding up," I said, feigning concern. "I can only imagine how things must feel right now, surrounded by family and all." He attempted a laugh that fell flat. "You have no idea what you're talking about, really. It looks like everyone is suddenly interested in how you built your empire. How does it feel being at the center of that attention?" I locked my gaze onto his, letting him see the fire in my eyes. "Truth can be a heavy burden, don't you think?" A flicker of anger crossed his face, but he masked it quickly. "I'm fine, just dealing with a few misunderstandings." "Misunderstandings?" I echoed, letting out a chuckle. "A misunderstanding is when you forget to return a book to the library. What you did, that's a crime. You should watch your mouth," he replied, voice low and gravelly. "Oh, please spare me your threats. You're not in a position to intimidate anyone right now. You're the one who opened the door to this mess, and now the family can't ignore it. They're talking about who gets what from the estate like vultures." His face had paled, and I could see the adrenaline pumping in the veins of his neck as he searched for words. "You think you know everything because of some juicy gossip. You want to step into my shoes, you wouldn't last a day. Step into your shoes. Oh, sweetheart, I've dealt with the likes of you long before today. You underestimate me. I spent years in the shadows while you basked in the light. This is my moment." Before he could respond, I turned away, letting my presence linger like perfume. My family's laughter swirled around me, the debate growing louder, punctuated by his increasingly frantic attempts to regain control of the narrative. "Maybe we should take a road trip down memory lane," I heard a distant cousin say playfully just a few feet away. "Remember the time he told us his success stories at the poker table?" "Success? That's a funny way to say luck ran out." Another chimed in, laughter erupting from all directions, echoing and surrounding me with warmth. This was the moment when they had turned, and I was no longer the neglected outsider. The air felt charged, vibrant with life and justice, with the family at last waking up to the truth. As the clock on the wall ticked, I watched as my father's cousin stood alone now. Relatives who would have once crowded around him for stories and praise were peeling away, their disillusionment woven into their turned backs. I could see it, the realization creeping in like a shadow. One of my aunts stepped up to him, and the discussion grew more pointed. "We've all looked up to you before, but this. You need to take accountability," she exclaimed, her voice steady and unwavering. "Everyone deserves a second chance." He protested desperately, his eyes darting to catch my gaze, but I merely smiled sweetly. No sympathy would be given. The reactions were visceral and electric. Cousins agreed with my aunt, some even calling for retribution, and I could feel my heart swell with pride. Each shout, each vote of no confidence against him, though hurtful to him, felt like victory to me. "You should be ashamed of yourself," another relative exclaimed, shaking her head. He blinked rapidly, the facade crumbling before the spotlight of scrutiny. I'd finally seen the man stripped of his lies, redistributing the guilt he had piled onto others. This moment of collective acknowledgement made me feel powerful, and for the first time at a family gathering, I felt seen not just as a bystander, but as a key player who held the fate of our legacy in my hands. As I stood there, my heart full, an eruption of emotions washed over me. I realized healing would take time. There were scars that would fade but never disappear. However, today was a stepping stone in my journey toward reclaiming my worth. I too had family ties that could no longer be ignored. The wall of neglect that once surrounded me was, in that instance, dismantled brick by brick, revealing a boundless potential to belong. "Let's talk about the estate," a voice broke through my trance. It was my uncle, looking equally serious and eager. "With everything happening, we need to figure out how we want to move forward." I leaned in closer, my thoughts spinning about what I could say, how we could protect our family name and secure our futures. "Perhaps we should consider a family council. Everyone has a voice, especially now that we know the truth." Around me, the murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. It was a thrilling moment of unity, everyone coming together not just in light of betrayal but also in recognition of what mattered most: family loyalty, truth, and rebuilding the fractures left by deceit. As I stood amidst the discussions, my heart soared. No one could overlook me now. I had reclaimed my rightful place, and this family, which had been torn, would now see the strength of healing and justice together. The truth had spoken, and while my father's cousin faced his reckoning, I chose to walk forward into a future filled with hope and resilience, bound now not by shadows but by the triumphant light of justice.